Welcome to Satsunami. Hello everybody and welcome to another episode of Satsunami. I'm Satsunami and, I was thinking about a way to introduce you, but I really didn't want to say, and invading a tower block with me is my very good friend Adam. So, yeah, welcome, Adam. Welcome.
That's just what we do to keep ourselves sane in this crazy futuristic world of MegaTwitch.
Yeah.
Welcome, Judge Satsu. Let's bring law and order to these mean streets.
Thank you, Judge. Do you prefer Judge Adam or Judge Sandwich? Because
I prefer Judge Sandwich.
Judge Sandwich. Okay, that's
my official, my government name.
Yeah, of course, your legal name on your driving license.
Also, I'll give a shout out to S Banks. He came up with MegaTwitch and I stole it. I just thought it was great.
After I did chuckle when I read that. I was like, MegaTwitch, which, ironically enough, before we actually start today's topic, like a couple of minutes ago, just before we came on, there was news that Amazon themselves had bought, like, another company, and it's like, wonderful. It's like, so they are becoming MegaTwitch, essentially.
Basically, yeah.
Yeah, just...
The corporate landscape is becoming MegaCity One.
Yeah, it's starting to feel more like... Have you ever seen Demolition Man?
I don't think I've ever seen it all the way through. I think I've seen bits of it.
Yeah, there's like a kind of... Well, not a subplot, but kind of the lore behind it is there was a thing called the Franchise Wars, and the only thing that seemed to survive was Taco Bell for some weird reason. And that's what I'm thinking. It's like, yeah, everything's gone in the far future. But Amazon always survives somehow. But anyway... Yeah, we love you, really, and please don't.
Proverbial cockroach.
Yeah, it's like, please don't take us off the air, please. So yeah, as you can see, today we are indeed talking about, where do I even begin with this? Because a couple of weeks ago, you and I talked about two very influential action films that we both absolutely love, that of course being The Raid. But before we saw The Raid, there was this particular film that we're going to be talking about today, that of course being Dredd. Where do we even begin with this? How do you describe Dredd?
Well, I don't know how familiar the listeners are with the character of Judge Dredd, who is a comic book character created in the late 70s by a British comic company, 2000 AD. And basically, the story basically is that in like the far distant future, thanks to numerous nuclear wars, like much of the Earth has become like irradiated and uninhabitable. So humanity is kind of congregated in what's called these megacities based across the globe. And Judge Dredd, the universe Judge Dredd, is in MegaCity One, which is on the eastern seaboard of America. And it varies, like, I think in the comics it runs from, like, Boston in the north of America down to Florida in the south. But I think in the movie here they say it's, like, Boston to DC, did they say something like that? It kind of varies. It kind of varies depending, like, whoever's making the story. But its idea is this giant conglomeration of humanity together in one, like, contiguous city. And then it said the Earth around it, known as the Cursed Earth, and is uninhabited. Well, basically it's mutants and bandits, people who live outside the walls. And basically the only thing keeping order in this giant, like, city where most of the population are unemployed is the judges system. Which basically these judges are judge, jury, and executioner all rolled into one, and have total authority to sentence and carry out punishment and everything. And Judge Dredd is one of these titular judges. Don't know if I covered all the bases there, but that's basically the setup for.
Yeah, no, I think you covered it quite well. And I mean, it is quite... it was the 80s, wasn't it, that Judge Dredd kind of came onto the scene?
Yeah, so he was created in the late 70s. And then, yeah, he's been a continuous character since then. But yeah, like through the 80s, 90s and everything like that, yeah.
And I have to admit, although maybe like I've missed like some iterations, because I know he's been through a couple, like he's got comic books, he's had games, shout out to Judge versus Death, which I haven't played personally, but everybody I know has and says it's great.
It's pretty good.
Yeah. I really need to get it, or not get it, but I need to try it. Yeah, there's been, as I said, comics, games, and Before this, now I don't know if it's like, you know how you get Marvel films where they had this like awkward period like in the 80s where they made like some random film like Captain America, whereas like they made like the Captain America film of the 80s but no one really thinks about it.
Yeah.
Because I don't know if Judge Dredd went through a similar phase, but oh boy, when we get to the 90s, and sorry, just for any Judge Dredd fans out there listening, no, we're not going to be discussing the 1995 one. This is going to be the 2000.
Not today.
Yeah, this is going to be the 2012 one. But my God, like, I was saying this to you before we came on stream today. It's like apples and oranges with those two films, isn't it?
Yeah, it is very much. They are very different. Despite being based on the same character, they are quite different.
Yeah. Because Dredd, as you were saying, it's a very, I wouldn't say very serious, but quite a dystopian future, isn't it? Where, as you said, there's like lots of lawlessness, there's lots of, you know, chaos and everything, and only the judges are like that fine line between it descending into complete anarchy and everything.
Yeah.
If you watch the 1995 one with Sylvester Stallone, it is very interesting. It's like this is what I was saying to you before. If you took if you took Judge Dredd out of that film, it would just be another kind of generic 90s like sci-fi film, wouldn't it?
Yeah. Oh yeah, and it's not a bad one at that as well.
Yeah.
Like, it's nothing great, but it's like, as you say, if you took Judge Dredd out and they called it, I think I said Judge Dredd or something. They call him whatever else you want, Judge Drell. I don't know, just something else,
Judge
Judy.
Yeah.
Judge Judy, call him Judge Judy. That's a good one. And then like that, it would just be a pretty much run of the mill kind of like middle of the road action film, which is actually, to be honest, you can have fun watching it. Like, it's not like a total like stinker by any means. But as you say, it's because it's adapting this like character. It just misses the mark so badly.
And I mean, it hasn't really. It's kind of weird. And again, maybe I've missed like a film in between like that and the 2012 version. But it's weird how, although the character's like so beloved, there wasn't really any films in between. Especially,
I think this one kind of killed it off. I think.
Yeah, I can understand that. But I mean, it's like, if you actually think about it, because I was thinking of the parallels between another character, which I know you brought up when we were talking about Judge Dredd, that of course being RoboCop, who came out at the same time, and you actually sent me a picture of like the prototype of RoboCop. Do you want to explain that?
Yes, so basically, but just a shout, there's a really good, if anybody's interested, there's a really good documentary about 2000 AD called Future Shock. You can watch it on Prime if anybody's interested, but it goes through the history of the company. It talks a lot about like their influence on pop culture and actually what kind of a big impact this comic company did have. And one of the things they talked about was how RoboCop, like, quote unquote, borrows a lot from Judge Dredd, and that included the original design for RoboCop, where basically the helmet was exactly the same as Judge Dredd's helmet originally. I think they were going to have the same kind of body and stuff, but it was going to be that same helmet with the visor, and then the kind of almost like the V shape with the I don't know quite what the shape is, but it's almost like a Y, but missing missing the stem. Yeah. And you're like, well, that is, borrow isn't quite, that is literally you're lifting verbatim there. But it does share, and honestly, I think I said this, RoboCop is a better Judge Dredd film than the 1995 Judge Dredd, to be honest. It has that, it has the same kind of setting, and it has a lot of the same themes, but it also has that kind of very dark, satirical edge that the comics were known for most of their run. So in many ways, it's a very good, actually, adaptation of Judge Dredd.
Yeah, compared to the... In fact, did we watch the 95 film?
Yeah, we did. We did.
Yeah.
A while back.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to make sure that you were there when we watched.
I am the law!
No! That guy just... I can't remember who the actor is who plays like the villain in that film, but I just remember the way he said law, where it's, as you said, Sylvester Stallone goes, law, and then he just turned around and he goes, law! It's like, my God.
It's proper scenery chewing throughout. But that film, obviously, I know we're not going to talk about this film, but there's one story I find very funny about it and quite telling. I think a film critic asked Sylvester Stallone about kind of Judge Dredd and why it wasn't received that well. And apparently Stallone answered, I was going to do a Stallone accent, I won't. He answered, he said, well, the main problem was that when I took off the helmet, that's also one big thing. He takes off the helmet very, very early on in the film, which is something that the character never does. But he said, well, the problem was that when I took off the helmet, nobody laughed. He obviously had this idea that it was his broad comedy or something that he was going for. Like, that's not to say there has been a lot of dark humor in Judge Dredd, and that's what it's known for. But it's not really a broad, like, laugh out loud kind of thing. So I think that's a big reason of why this film is not like well received by fans of the character.
You guys like listening at home might be wondering like, why the hell are we talking about this film so much when we're going to be going on to the 2012 film? But honest to God, like, I cannot stress enough how this was probably the last major film of this franchise before, it got to, let's face it, what became like dark and gritty.
Yeah.
Kind of, how to put it, I wouldn't go as far as to say like grimdark, but it's not far off, is it? It's a very like miserable world that they set up. Because I'm actually trying to remember why I went to see this film, and I don't mean that in an old man kind of. Why the hell did I go to see this?
You get confused, like, what did I come here to see?
It's like, oh, I can't wait to see him. I don't know, The Last Mimsy or something. I don't know. I was just like completely off topic, but I remember reading this story about that where it was like I think it was The Last Mimsy or something, like this children's film that all these kids went to go see, and then they got the films mixed up, and it turned out it was like The Hills Have Eyes 2 or something. It's like, yeah, as soon as that came on, it was just like, oh, fuck, poor children. But anyway, yeah, speaking of grimdark, Dredd. So I honestly can't remember the reason. I think it was because one of my friends is really into Judge Dredd. Like, I mean, he doesn't collect the comics, but he knows like a lot about the lore and everything, and he played the games. So one day he turned around and he said, "Oh, do you want to go see it in the cinema?" And I was like, I don't really know. And he's like, this is how like put off I was, because he was like, "Oh, let's go see it, and it's also in 3D," which, for those of you like, I doubt there's going to be anyone there that too young to kind of remember when all these films were coming out in 3D and it was just a plague. Like, do you remember this? Like, there was like a good couple of years where a lot of films were coming out in 3D, and it was just like, obviously some films still come out in 3D. I'm not saying it's gone completely, but like most of it was a gimmick. It was more like, I don't know, like, I remember going to see Harry Potter in 3D once, and it was literally like one scene. Yeah. And the rest of it's like, okay, we're done. Put off your take off your glasses. And it's like, wait, no.
The Hobbit films, I remember seeing the first Hobbit film in 3D. Like, I don't know, the others were released in 3D, but do you know the actual title for when the film was when Dredd was released? The actual title was Dredd 3D.
Oh, so it was. Yeah.
And if you actually look on the poster, like, I'm on the Wikipedia page. If you're on the Wikipedia page, it has Dredd, then it has the 3D underneath. So it was a big thing. I mean, and we can come back to that, but one of the reasons I think the film didn't do as well, as people hoped, was the 3D. It was basically, especially in the UK, you could only really see it in 3D. That put a lot of people off. Where I think if they'd had a bigger 2D, showing, I think it probably would have done a bit, maybe not maybe massively better, but it would have done better, I think.
I'm trying to think back of, like the films in 3D back then. I mean, you had Avatar, and all of that, which, again, is a sore spot. Because, like, at the time of recording this, they keep saying that the sequel's coming and everything, and, it's going to be the best thing since, sliced alien bread or something, and it's like, yeah, sure. And it's like, the whole 3D thing is just, I don't know, it's like, it seemed like a gimmick at the time. Like, a lot of films were just putting it in for the sake of it. But with Dredd, I'm not gonna lie here, I think it's one of the best films I've ever seen in 3D. I genuinely think at the time it done a really good job, but it seems weird because it wasn't a film I expected to be as good in 3D. Like, I don't know, like, did you feel as if it was like a gimmick, or?
I mean, well, if you want one of the real reasons why 3D was such a push thing at the time is because because 3D films are harder to pirate than 2D films, which is one of the big reasons the studios pushed it. I saw it in 3D. And I'd actually forgotten that it was in 3D until you reminded me. I don't remember it being off-putting or anything, which is probably the best endorsement I'll give to 3D. I'm gonna be honest, I can't really remember what it was like in 3D. I've watched it in 2D since, and that's more what stays in my mind than the 3D. So, I mean, the fact that I can't remember it being bad take that as an endorsement that it must have been good.
See, the strange thing is, though, when you rewatch this film in 2D, you can honestly tell, like, the scenes that they wanted in 3D, which is kind of off-putting when... we'll kind of go through it, but yeah, it's kind of off-putting when you're watching this film, and you see, like, some slow-mo scenes, pun, don't worry, we'll explain. Slow-mo scenes and everything, and glass coming out the screen. And in 3D, like, I don't remember it vividly, but I do remember thinking, oh god, this is great. But then again, at the same time, there was also that Abe Lincoln Vampire Hunter film, which, see, no matter what way you look at that, I'll still maintain that was one of the best 3D films I saw as well. Like, honestly, like, even if the plot was, like, ridiculous in that one, like, at least the 3D delivered, and I can't believe I'm admitting that, but...
Move over, Gravity.
Yeah, exactly.
Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter was the real 3D masterpiece.
Yeah, they were robbed at the Oscars. They were just... But it's the same, though, with Dredd. It's like, you go in thinking... And again, I have to admit, like, the friend I went with, this was the same friend who was like, oh, let's go see Ghost Rider 2 in 3D. Yeah, we don't speak anymore. But no, jokes aside, it's one of those films that you don't really know what to expect, I suppose. Like, you expect action and everything, but it honestly is. Like, if you don't... Would you say, though, that, see if you were going into this film completely blind, would you say someone without, like, a knowledge of Dredd would kind of know what to expect from this?
Oh, I mean, if they see the poster, they might have an idea. Where it's a guy with it's a stern-faced looking guy with a gun standing in the front of two tower blocks. Two mega tower blocks are on fire and exploding behind them. So if you see that poster, you might get an idea. I mean, you might not expect the excessive violence. You might expect some violence. You might not expect the excessive level of violence. And it's worth saying this is an excessively violent film.
Oh yeah.
That could be a shock. But at the same time, like, I don't know. I mean, I don't know quite well. So I guess unless you think it's a horror, you're like, oh, Dredd. If you don't know it's spelled with 3Ds, you might think it's an A. Yeah. Maybe you think it's a horror film. Which, in many ways, I suppose, is the horror of living in one of these gigantic tower blocks.
Well, that is true. Yeah, speaking of horror, actually, can we briefly touch on, like, the setting of Dredd? So you were saying earlier it's basically a mega city that stretches between, like, states and the US.
Yeah.
And outside of these walls is this, like, massive desert filled with mutants and nasty gribblies and stuff. It's like, yeah, basically, nasty stuff. Yeah, that's the scientific term for this. But it's really... One of the things I have to admit, rewatching it, that I got put off by was the fact it does look like a normal city. Like, this is going to sound stupid, but it's like the whole city looks, relatively just like a generic American city. But they've got, like, the CGI, like, tower blocks kind of placed in.
Yeah.
And... I don't know, like, on the one hand it gives it a kind of sense of realism. The CGI towers don't stand out, like, I'm not saying that at all, but at the same time you're kind of like, yeah, you can tell this is just a normal city that they've got, like, drone shots of.
Yeah.
And, there's just like, oh, by the way, Jim, put a tower there, put a tower there, put a drone flying over, and yeah, you're good. Because I think, see, once they're in the tower itself, like, later on in the film, I feel as if that's when you kind of think, okay, this is... the film started, guys. But before that, you're kind of like... But again, it's like... It's not the worst thing. I wouldn't say it's overly off-putting. Like...
I think that's the major problem with the film, is that it had a relatively small budget for what these films are. So it had a budget of it's estimated between $30 and $45 million, which isn't like that much. I mean, you compare it to like the 1995 Stallone one had a budget of $85 to $90 million.
Jeez.
I mean, okay, no, I don't know, judge that for inflation, I'm not sure, but that's a lot. I still think that's a lot more. And I think, actually, to give praise to the 1995 film, one aspect that it is better in is that they actually, like, created a city that you're like, oh, this feels really different, and this does feel like this kind of dystopian city. And the problem with the 2012 Dredd one was they just didn't have the budget to include a lot of things, like, they had to use air shots of, I think it's Johannesburg and Cape Town were the two cities that they filmed in. So it's a lot of those ones that they then put these CGI tower blocks on.
Yeah.
But the world of Judge Dredd is filled with like robots and aliens and mutants, and you don't get any of that. And there's flying vehicles, there's lots of different. You don't get any. There's like one flying vehicle at the beginning. But then everything else takes place on the ground. There's all like normal cars, as you said, normal cars and vans and everything. And it does just feel a bit like a normal city, which is a shame because like one of the standouts of the Judge Dredd comic and stuff is this like crazy kind of like dystopian world that is recognizable in terms of like some of the issues going on, but like visually looks so different to anything that we have, like any cities that we live in now. So that is a shame, and it comes from the budget. It just comes from the fact they didn't have the budget to incorporate these elements into it.
It does just look so normal, and again, like it's not the worst thing. Like I'm probably just getting the negatives out the way here first, but it's like I was noticing even with the clothes and things that they were wearing. Obviously, except the judges, like clearly they've put all the money into like the judge costumes, which rightfully so they should, but the rest of them are just I'm pretty sure there's a guy in like jeans and a t-shirt just walking around and you're like, okay, this is the future.
Did you point out the guy in a freaking polo shirt? Like, what the hell? No polo shirts in MegaTwitch One.
Yeah. And you're just like, I have to admit, we will come on to that later. But like, whenever you see like gang members, it's like they've all got like tank tops and things on, and it's like, okay, he's got a vest on, he's a bad guy. He's got tattoos up his arm, he's a bad guy, and it's like, right, okay. Whereas everyone just seems relatively normal, and you're kind of like, but again, like as you said, it's the budget, and don't get me wrong, like I feel as if they do something, and again I'll come to that later, but they do something clever with like the clothing aspect like later on in the film. But yeah, it's like kind of a small thing. Like I think the vehicles as well, as you were saying, like I remember like I was rewatching it again recently, and I noticed, see when Dredd and these new rookie are leaving the tower or the judges headquarters, they're walking out and they go on like their judge bikes, which seem to be the most futuristic thing in this film. Yeah. And behind them are just like these kind of generic kind of like vans or like police vans, and you're like, oh man. No. But
even the bikes though, like if you look at the actual, this is another thing of mine that since we're talking about negatives of the film, I'll get these, if I can quickly get these out of the way. I'm not a huge fan of like what they did to the judges' uniforms and the vehicles. Now, if you look at like the bikes in the comics and stuff, it's almost like these like, it's almost like these kind of Harley Davidson style choppers with these giant wheels, which are actually impractical. And I think they tried making one for the 1995 film, and they found out that it couldn't work. You couldn't turn it at all because the wheel was so big. Yeah. But like, I don't know, like it just had that really cool aesthetic. And the armor in the comics is so like, it's so ridiculous. And it's like the giant eagle is like sitting off the judge's like right shoulder and everything. And it looks impractical as all hell, but it gives it a very marked aesthetic, which really fits in. And they've incorporated some of it into the judges' costumes. Like they've kept the helmet, and I like the helmet. That's very true to it. And the lawgiver as well, like his weapon is true to the comics as well. But the uniform just, I don't know, it kind of looks like just generic combat, like gear, in a way that it doesn't have that same standout quality that the comics do. And even the I can't believe I'm praising the 1995 film here so much, but even it had like a distinct aesthetic, which I don't know, like just kind of fits in. And it was a shame to like, and it's not a deal breaker. I don't think it's a terrible thing, but it's just a shame that it's not like, they didn't stick to that kind of aspect of the character. But yeah, it's just my personal opinion.
I know what you mean, because like when I was rewatching it, it does give off, like if you have no idea about Dredd, and you come into this blind, honestly, the first couple of minutes, you might think he's just like a very angry biker. Yeah. Because he's like putting on his leather jacket, he's putting on the armour, he literally rides a bike into the city, and you kind of think, God, okay, right, okay, this is Sons of Anarchy 2044 or something. Nah, jokes aside, it's, I can totally see where you're coming from, because it isn't, it did seem a lot flashier in the 95 version compared to this one. But again, as you said, it's not a deal breaker, and that's probably like... I mean, would you say that's your major gripe with the film?
Yeah, look, I think that is my. I have another gripe, but I'll talk about it at the end. But it's not the film's fault.
Yeah,
it's nothing actually to do with the film itself. In terms of actually the film, like my big gripes are the aesthetics of it. Really, to be honest,
I would agree. I think up until they get to pretty much until they get to Peach Trees, which is like the flats that they have to climb up. And sorry, just before we go on, there's something that I really need to point out, which again, we kind of mentioned it or touched on it rather at the beginning, but the fact that this film came out at the same time as The Raid, do you think that was a good or a bad thing for Dredd?
I don't know in the moment if it was a bad thing, because you might argue it put more people maybe onto it.
Yeah,
I'm not entirely sure. I think maybe in comparison, I do think The Raid is a better film.
Oh yeah,
and it has more unique action. I mean, that's not to say that Dredd's action is bad, but it's more similar to what you see in a lot of other action films. While The Raid is so unique and such a breath of fresh air that like I think that makes it stand out from Dredd. So I don't know. Like I don't think the Raid is like The Raid coming out at the same time is a reason this film didn't financially do well.
Oh yeah, not
but
at all,
I think maybe just in comparison, it's a shame. You know, I think maybe one of the shames is I think a lot of people accuse the writers of Dredd of ripping off the Raid's gimmick, which isn't actually true because this film was in development for a while. You know, this concept, like they had this idea before The Raid. It's just one of these things. It's just one of these coincidental things where people come up with a similar concept.
And I mean, if you really think about it though, because as you said, a lot of people kept comparing these two films, which was the reason why I found out about The Raid. I had no idea what The Raid was until people kept saying, "Oh, Dredd, it's just like that film, The Raid," and I'm like, "What's The Raid? Explain, tell me." And of course, it was one of the greatest action films that I've ever seen, which totally not biased there. Nah, jokes aside. Yeah, it's as you said, I don't think it was like the reason like it kind of flopped, or I wouldn't say flopped, but didn't do as well as they probably expected. But I mean, the only real similarities is both of them have a tower or that like block of flats, and they're both like producing drugs and everything, and that's really where it ends, isn't it? Because the action in Dredd compared to The Raid, it's not similar at all, is it?
No, not at all. Like, if the raid is like ballet, then Dredd is like a fist fight in a bar. Yeah. In terms of it's a much heavier kind of hard hitting. Well, not hard hitting because the Raid's hard hitting as well, but more kind of like a heavier kind of clunkier style.
Yeah, like in your face, kind of. Yeah, it definitely is in your face with a lot of the violence. Like, I mean, The Raid was as well, but with some of the Dredd. In fact, you know what? Let's dive into the plot and kind of explain what we're talking about.
Are we doing spoilers? Yeah. I forgot to ask before we started, but we're doing spoilers.
It's like...
I always like to make sure.
Yes, so this is your spoiler warning for this episode. So if you don't want to hear about Dredd and its wonderful spoileriness, if that's even the word, then yep, this is your last chance. I have to admit, I really like the beginning of this film in the sense of how it establishes Dredd as a character. Because as I said, coming into this, you have no idea what you're in for, It's like, oh, there's a desert outside, there's like a couple of states worth of like one city. You're like, what is going on here? And then, of course, you've got Dredd, who is getting ready for like just a routine patrol, isn't he?
Yeah.
And he comes across these two, or rather three, guys in a van who are taking drugs and, not nice people. And they realise that they're getting, chased. And you can see initially, like, Dredd is definitely a character of... Like, obviously, the law is, the most important thing to him. Like, no matter what, he, like, carries it out to the letter. Like, if somebody, runs over someone, which is exactly what happens, he's chasing after them. And... even though, like, they're trying to shoot at him, he doesn't retaliate, which I thought was quite interesting. It's like he's avoiding and everything, and he's not really retaliating. But as soon as they hit a person, like, as a hit and run, they just, like, bomb into this guy who's on his AirPods, and he just goes right under the truck. And then he phones it in saying, oh no, they've killed an innocent, I'm taking them down. Which is something that kind of is brought up later in, like, a very, very cool scene. But we will get to that. And Like, he goes in, he eventually, like, corners, like, they end up crashing and he corners, like, this one guy in this restaurant, or rather, it's more like a shopping mall, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a shopping mall kind of style. Yeah.
And he's taking this woman hostage, and he literally has a gun up to this woman's head, saying, you know, like, oh, I'm going to shoot her if you don't back off. To which he's completely unfazed by this, which kind of gives you, like, a sense that he's obviously seen this before. This isn't phasing them. Because even by his body language throughout the film, have you noticed that?
Yeah.
He always stands, you know, upright, and he doesn't flinch, really. He just stands as if, oh, this is just another day in the office. And he just brings out his gun and he says to the guy, like, oh, you know, I'm going to put you in jail if you comply. You're also not going to get parole. And the guy's like laughing at him, saying, you know, that's terrible, you know, negotiations. And then, of course, he shoots him with a flare because he won't cooperate. And that just shows you, like, how brutal Dredd is. Even with a hostage, he's just like, he just executes this guy on the spot. And that kind of gives you, like, an idea of the lawlessness, really.
And it defines the two big characteristics of the Dredd character, which are that he's a ruthless individual, you know, who doesn't show compassion for the most part, but also who has a strong moral code, and who will not break that. As you said, like he says, you know, your choice here is life in what they call the ISO cubes, which is like the future prison, or death. You know, that's your two choices here. So it's a very effective way of defining, just as you said, the key, like not only the city as well, but the key characteristics of our main protagonist.
It's so good, like, as like a character introduction for, especially for Dredd. It's like quite a short sequence, but it's like action packed, and I think it's this scene that we get like our first kind of gimmicky, like, slow-mo shot. So throughout the film, there is this new drug. This kind of introduces, like, what will be like an ongoing conflict in the film, where there's this new drug that's hit Mega City One called slow-mo, which, despite the name, because the name is a bit, like, then again, I suppose it's supposed to be, it's a bit kind of silly, but yeah, the aim of it, or rather the effect of it, is when you inhale it. So it's like an asthma inhaler, isn't it?
It's a hyped, jumped up asthma inhaler.
Essentially, yeah. It's like when you inhale it, everything around you slows down, like time just comes to a halt, everything becomes, you know, a lot more saturated and brighter, you know, like a literal high from this. And eventually, like, they say how this new drug is kind of sweeping through the city and they need to kind of stop it, and this also becomes the kind of driving force of the, like, effects in the film, because whenever someone uses slow-mo, we either get like a first-person perspective from the person using it, or you're gonna get like a slow-motion shot, like when they kick down doors and they do like the Call of Duty, like, slow-mo shooting and things like that, and you're like, oh goodness, this is going to be... Which is, as I said, I remember it like years ago being great in 3D, but in 2D, it's still impressive, but yeah, like in 2D, it's like, I wouldn't say it's bad, but it's one of those things where you look at it and you know that it was supposed to be more of an effect than it was supposed to be like a critical scene for the film.
It's quite gimmicky.
Yeah, it's gimmicky. Yeah, you summed it up. Yeah, it's gimmicky. And of course, that introduces us to basically the main antagonist of the film, who, yeah, is not a nice lady. But sorry, before we go on to that, we're also introduced to another character called Anderson. It is Anderson, isn't it?
Yeah, Judge Anderson.
Yeah, Judge Anderson, who is a mutant, and, you know, despite the name, she's just like a regular woman who has like these psychic abilities, which normally is considered like... Usually mutants in this universe are considered to be like weird, horrible creatures that live beyond the walls, but she's just like this average woman who... She joins the judges and she's not very good at her job, is she? They establish early on, like, she's good at her psychic powers, but they say things like, oh, she's failed the test, she's basically, I think, the eyes of the audience, isn't she?
Well, that's it. Like, it's the in many ways, although this film is called Dredd, and Judge Dredd is the main character, like, the real emotional development in this film goes to Anderson. And as you say, it is kind of like the way that we we view this world through her eyes.
Yeah.
In the way that she most closely resembles probably what most of our reactions would be like
Yeah.
to this situation.
She is. She's just like very inquisitive, I suppose. Very like, what we're going to do, where we're going to go, and of course, Dredd's boss says, "Oh, by the way, on your next shift, take Anderson." And he's like, "Okay." Oh well, he doesn't say okay, but he's very like, he's quite apprehensive, I would say.
Well, you get more of that kind of uncompromising like attitude, because she says like, "Oh well, she only failed the test by like 3%. You know, it's nearly a pass," and he's like, "That's a fail." Like, you know, he's like, "It's a fail." You know, he's just uncompromised. Like, clearly, he's like, well, she's not cut out to be a judge. And obviously, like, the only reason like they keep persisting with her is because she's such a powerful psychic.
Yeah.
That's the only reason they're kind of like bending the rules for her here, and that's just not in. They said that's not in Dredd's moral code. Is to you know, the law is the law. To him, and you know, and everything. Like, there's no break, there's no bending the rules, there's no going outside of them. They're there, and you have to work within their framework.
He's a very black and white character. Like, in his perspective of the world, which you can understand why, considering the beginning of the film, where it shows you this city of lawlessness and literally a group of bikers with helmets are the only thing keeping like the public safe. I'm going to have a lot of angry Dredd fans like messaging me now saying, "How dare you call him a biker in a helmet?" But no, jokes aside, it's interesting to see, like, it's basically the Odd Couple, isn't it? It's like,
it basically is.
Oh, he's a stuck-up judge and she's a naive rookie. How are they going to get along?
Naive mutant. How are they going to do?
I'm just thinking of like the sitcom spin-off. It's like, oh, how's it going to go? Yeah, if any Dredd writers are out there listening to this, please write a sitcom for this. Nah, I'm only kidding. Yeah, eventually that leads on to, the villain of the piece, who is... How do I even begin with this? Basically, a woman called Mama, who used to be like at the bottom of the rung in her criminal world, and through violence she rose up the ranks and basically brutalised everybody in her way.
Pretty much.
And oh yeah, she is just a horrible, horrible person in this. She's actually played by the same actress who plays Cersei Lannister in Game of Thrones. I think it's Lena Headey
or something like that.
Yeah, and she does a fantastic job, by the way. She does like a really good job in the film. But yeah, our first introduction is quite similar. Like, I can kind of understand. This is when, I bring up the raid again, where people are saying, oh, how is it similar? Because there's literally a scene where the first time we see the villain is when they've got 3, like, enemy guys tied up, ready to get, like, tortured and killed. And I kind of thought, looking back, I was like, yeah, okay, this is kind of similar. But obviously, it's just a coincidence. It's like, it's not, you can't, trademark, that kind of scene. But
it's just an effective way to establish that your main villain is a very nasty person.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, she basically gives the go-ahead for them to not only skin these, like, guys alive, so they're basically, like, rival gangsters, like, selling on their turf, and they've been caught, they've been tied up, and the guy says, why don't we skin them alive, pump them full of slow-mo, this drug, and then throw their, bodies off the balcony, so that they fall and hit the plaza underneath without caring about the people below, which, ironically enough, is their downfall. Kind of.
Yeah.
Like, it is what attracts attention to them for the judges, and this is why Anderson and Dredd end up being in Peachtrees, which is the big, like, apartment complex, and they end up going in, like, just to investigate the homicides, and they end up instead capturing one of the main gangsters in the film, who clearly has, like, a lot of knowledge that, fortunately, because Anderson is like, she reads his mind and said, oh, it's this guy, he's the one who threw him, this person off the balcony, but because she's only 99% sure, which again, that loops back to what you were saying about Dredd being like, this black and white objective character, where he's like, oh, we can't execute him on 99%. It's like he has to know that this 100% is the guy that killed, those 3 people in the atrium. And they give you, like, really gruesome close-ups of the bodies, like, splatting when they get thrown over. That, and it's like one of the is one of those weird POV shots. When these guys are killed, it shows you from their perspective of them getting pumped with the slow-mo and then shoved off, and then you see them slowly falling, which you think, okay, another kind of gimmicky scene, but yeah, then they have a kind of close-up of the bodies and you're like, oh, that is nasty. And yeah, that eventually kind of leads into the main conflict, where Mama realises that if the judges escape with this guy, then yeah, her whole operation's going to come crashing down. So she locks them in. Unfortunately, it ends up, there's kind of a side bit where they come into the building and they notice there's a homeless man sitting outside, and they're saying, don't don't be sitting there when we get back, because obviously the guy's not meant to be loitering there. But that kind of shows a bit of leniency with Dredd, doesn't it?
Well, but that's one of the things that they establish earlier in the film is that there's 17,000 serious crimes happening every minute.
Yeah.
And the judges can respond to 6% of them. And so it's literally Judge Dredd says, Anderson's, well, how do you choose 6%? And he says, well, you tell me. This is your assessment. You choose the case, which is why they end up going there. And then, as you say, as they pass the homeless guy, vagrancy is a crime. But they, and say, but we should prioritize. We need to prioritize the murder. Mm-hmm. And so that's what Dredd says. Don't be back. Don't be here when we come back. And he still is, and they're about to lock him up. And then, yeah,
he gets crushed by the big door. It's oh no. And yeah, that of course leads to the main conflict of the film, where they basically have to fight for their lives in this tower and scale it and everything. And Mama gives basically the speech of, everybody stay out our way, we're going to kill these judges off. If you get in our way, we're just going to kill you as well. To which everyone collectively shits themselves and runs for cover. Rightfully so. And that eventually leads to some really interesting scenes. So this is where I bring up the polo shirt again. Which, I know you might be thinking, what the hell? What the hell does a polo shirt have to do with Dredd? There's one scene where basically they're fighting through the corridors and they take out a good couple of them, and they go into this or they're hiding behind a door, and these there's about 10 guys behind the door, only 2 of them, and they've still got this not hostage but prisoner with them, and they give them a chance to drop their weapons and flee, and they say, right, we are gonna let you go, or not let you go, but if you surrender, then we'll arrest you, and everything will be fine. To which they're very cocky, and the majority of them just look like typical gangsters, don't they?
Yeah.
The kind of vests and the tattoos and the cuts all over their faces. Except one guy, which I have to admit, I didn't really notice until I rewatched the film. There's one guy in a polo shirt, and you're he just looks like a regular guy. And, they breach the door, and there's a slow-mo scene where, they shoot them all and everything. And eventually Anderson comes face-to-face with the guy in the polo shirt, who is still alive. He's been shot, and he's, dying. And he's, begging for his life. To which Dredd simply just says, really coldly, what are you waiting for? You tried to kill us. Therefore, it's... Wait, that's illegal. So Anderson says, yeah, sure, okay. And... kind of hesitantly, but just shoots them.
Yeah.
The kind of vests and the, tattoos and the cuts all over their faces. Except one guy, which I have to admit, I didn't really notice until I rewatched the film. There's one guy in a polo shirt, and you're he just looks like a regular guy. And, they breach the door, and there's a slow-mo scene where, they shoot them all and everything. And... eventually, Anderson comes face-to-face with the guy in the polo shirt, who is still alive. He's been shot, and he's, dying. And he's, begging for his life. To which Dredd simply just says, really coldly, what are you waiting for? You tried to kill us. Therefore, it's... Wait, that's illegal. So Anderson says, yeah, sure, okay. Kind of hesitantly, but just shoots him. To which you find out later that he was actually a family man who, I mean, obviously it doesn't say outright, I don't think, correct me if I'm wrong, but, it's kind of that idea of maybe he was pressured into it, because you can see, because they go into this room and they manage to break their way, or trick their way, let's just say, into this room. The Anderson finds out, like, she looks at one of the photos, and just by coincidence she sees that the guy that she killed earlier was the owner of this flat's husband. And it is very much a kind of humanising moment, I guess, but it seems to be the only moment we get like that. I mean, I guess it's to show, like, Anderson's kind of conflicted. You know, like, Dredd immediately is just like, yeah, shoot him. But Anderson's kind of more hesitant to carry out those orders unless absolutely, you know, she knows for a fact that this is what she should be doing to defend herself.
Yeah. Well, you get one moment near the end of the film as well, but as you say, this is a very kind of humanizing moment, and we see a lot more of Anderson's character, and like the way that she isn't. You know, she isn't really suited for this life of being a judge, which really does seem to require the kind of ruthless, like, callousness of Dredd, of someone like Dredd. Yeah, and as well, like, one of the big things about Mega City One, this world, is that unemployment is absolutely rampant because, like, robots have basically been developed to take over the majority of jobs. So most people in the Mega City are unemployed. So, like, you can kind of see in a way, like, unemployment is often a reason for why people fall into a gang lifestyle, you know, lack of opportunity, and that there is that element. You know, again, we don't get much development from this character, but you can you can see that as being a way that, you know, if you don't have much going on, you know, in this pretty squalid environment, everything run by a gang, you know, how easy it is to fall into that lifestyle. So it kind of gives you a little bit more about the world and shows you the kind of, like, bleak, you know, the bleak nature of it for most ordinary citizens.
I have to admit, one of the things I did think was really good about, like, this whole part of the film really was the fact that they showed you other people that lived in the flats. It could have been so easy to do something very similar, and again, I'm not saying that they copied one another, but it could have been so easy to do something similar to the Raid, where other than obviously one particular character, they just kind of hid everybody else away, you know, like all the non-combatants and everything, and the non-gang members and things. But for Dredd, they show you the people who live in this place, like, you know, going about the business, pushing prams, and they've got kids and everything, you know, like playing video games, and you've got kids outside for some reason that are skateboarding, which I thought, okay, fair enough, that's pretty cool, but if you fell off, then you're never getting back up.
Yeah.
Like a very tall building, which I suppose that's to establish a later scene, but in fact, when we talk about the scene, the minigun scene.
Yeah, I suppose it's kind of, I mean... Yeah, it is actually the next scene. So I've got it up on Netflix here, so I'm just scrolling through to look at what scenes come next, and it is not very long after, so we might as well. They try to get into this medical center because each tower block has a medical facility with a medic on standby who's greeted the judges and, you know, told them about, like, say the cause of death, more about, like, the bodies that are found at the beginning, because the cause of death is pretty self-explanatory. But yeah, so the judges try and get their prisoner into there so they can kind of lock down and defend, but he won't let them in. You know, because the mama has said anybody harboring the judges will not only will they get killed, but, like, their family, you know, the next generation will be killed. So he makes a choice, and he's like, no, I'm staying neutral in this. And Dredd pointedly puts out, no, you're not. You're not staying. You're choosing a side here. You're choosing their side. So they have to go off, and they decide they try and find somewhere else. And as you say, they go up a couple floors, and come in for a rude shock.
And this kind of loops back to what I was saying at the very beginning of this film, where, like, at the beginning when he's chasing down those criminals, he does everything to kind of defend himself, but he doesn't really shoot, like, randomly, or not randomly, but he doesn't shoot unless he absolutely has to. Or, you know, unless it's, like, justified in terms of, the law and everything like that. But in this case, you see him getting very irked because I think it's the first time you see Dredd actually visibly shaken. Maybe not like a traditional action hero, because usually this would be the bit where they've got their heads in the hands or something. But eventually him and Anderson see that Mama has said, like, initially she says, oh, I just wanted this to be a clean kill, but because the judges, you know, rightfully so, aren't cooperating, they're like, right, okay, we better get out of here. We better just take them down ourselves. So just like one other thing before I go on. The reason, you might be wondering, well, why can't they, you know, call for backup? Or, you know, why can't they, you know, unlock the doors or whatever? The reason being is because the Mama clan, as they're known, has also taken over, like, the control system, and they've sent in, like, a fake they say it's like a fake war drill or something like that, don't they? So it's like it's completely locked down the building, so there's absolutely no way in or out, and that's blocking communications as well. So it means that they just cannot get help. So they're honestly like rats in a maze where they're just completely isolated, cut off. And as soon as she brings out like this huge like Gatling gun, let's face it, and she starts ripping through, like she doesn't care. That's the thing, she's not really aiming, well she is aiming for the judges, but she doesn't care who she's also hitting, and she tears up like a lot of poor people who are, you know, in the flats across from this gun. And yeah, there's just loads of bodies strewn everywhere, and you can see Dredd get visibly angry at this, to which there is one cool scene where, you know, they think, oh, did we get him? And you see 2 minutes later out of the smoke this guy getting thrown like over the edge, and then Dredd just like walks back into the smog, and you're like, okay, that's cool. That's cool. But at the same time, that gives them the chance to get outside to that skateboarding area we touched on earlier, and they manage to call for help, which will be important later. But then they think, right, we're going to have to go back in to try and stop Mama, where basically things go wrong.
Yeah.
And a couple of kids try to stop them, and because of that distraction, the gangster manages to basically gets Anderson into a lift, and they both manage to, well, he manages to, you know, kidnap her and take her up to the very top level, and quite possibly it leads to one of the coolest scenes in the film. Well, the coolest scene. Like, the last scene I said, oh, it's the coolest scene, but the last scene's probably the second coolest compared to this one, where Dredd makes his big speech. In fact, is that before or after he... Oh, no, sorry, that is before he burns the guys, but he makes the big speech saying... You know, kind of parallels what Mama was saying at the very beginning, saying, you know, I'm in control and everything. And he, like, takes over the intercom and he says, you know, oh, you think Mama's the law here? She's not the law. And then he does the iconic, I am the law. And you're like, bravo.
Oh, no, it's great.
Oh, it's so good. And then he ends up using his... Honestly, you called it... Is it the Lawmaker? Did you
Lawgiver.
Lawgiver. Sorry, Lawgiver. Which is the gun he carries around, and it has all this, like, different ammo. You know, incendiaries and things like that. It's like the Swiss... It's the Swiss Army gun, isn't it? Essentially.
Swiss Army knife of law enforcement.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly, because the amount of bullets in this thing are crazy, because it doesn't run out until the very end, and you're like, oh my god, what? But yeah, he ends up, of course, fighting his way up to the top, and it kind of, I wouldn't say it escalates, I feel as if that's where it almost peaks. Like, because both sides take like terrible casualties, and now you've got the stakes like right at the top, where you've got Anderson kidnapped and you've got Dredd like going to basically dole out justice, which it puts you on the edge of your seat though, doesn't it?
Yeah, it sets up for an exciting climax with these two things.
As I was saying before, like that kind of loops back to when they manage to get outside. They of course ring for help, and they say, you know, oh, it's there's 2 judges, like, they knock on the door and they're like, yay, you know, the judges are here to help. But then all of a sudden, and this should be like a giveaway, because you said it earlier, the fact that the judges can only respond to 6% of all of these serious crimes going on, and all of a sudden, like, these 2 judges are trying to get in, and you know, the doorman's just basically saying, oh, I can't let you in because, oh, the system's broken, quote unquote. Yeah, it's like, it's not really, but... And then 2 seconds later, 4 judges roll up and they say, we'll take it from here. And it's like, oh, okay, something's up here, because it's like, initially it was only 2 judges coming to back them up, and now it's like 4 coming in, to which you think, how did they get so many judges? To which then you realise, yep, surprise, they're corrupt. And they want, and they pretty much want money to take down Dredd, which I have to admit, 1 million credits is not enough, is it?
4 ways. Like, I originally thought it was like 1 million credits each, but it's split 4 ways. So you're like, that doesn't. You are selling yourself a little bit short, like, you know, a bit short here. Yeah,
like imagine going through the academy and then selling yourself out for like a 4-way like split of 1 million credits. It's like, it's not the best.
And in this city, inflation must be rampant.
Oh,
you know, like 250,000 credits probably can buy you, like, I don't know, 3 packets of crisps and a beer.
A copy of Heavy Rain.
Copy of Heavy Rain, there you go. Well, worth it then in that term.
Yeah, that is true.
I'd break the law for that.
Yeah, if you want to be depressed, just pick up a copy of that.
I'd buy that for 1 million credits.
Oh, God. Next week we'll be going on to Robocop. But yeah, of course, that leads to the climax where Dredd eventually finds the lab, doesn't he? The like slow-mo lab, and he has to fight against the other judges, which initially he thinks, oh, they're on my side. But then that, of course, leads to a brutal altercation where he but he chops a guy's throat in. And it's like...
That was great. I love that bit. It's like the judge is like, yeah. So he meets one of the judges, and like the judge is like, "Oh, I'm your backup and everything." You know, the other ones are coming, and then after a little bit of questioning, Dredd realizes that something's not right, and so they start grappling, and the other judge starts choking Dredd, and then he's like, "Choke on this, Dredd!" And the Dredd just like, as you say, karate chops him like in the throat. So much, and you just see the guy's throat like cave in and stuff, and he's just like, looking around. It's just like, oh, you should have chosen your words better, buddy.
It's surprisingly enough, like, I mean, I said this at the very beginning that, it's a lot more gritty and serious than, like, say, the 95 one. But there are a lot of quips, aren't there?
Yeah, there are quite a few.
Like, not, like, overly so. Like, it's not like Rob Schneider kind of levels of... yeah, let's throw in a reference every so often, but there's a surprising, like, amount of them where you're just like, interesting. Interesting choice. But it works, though. Like, it's not like it's out of place. Well, maybe the choke on your words one, or choke on this is a bit like,
maybe. That one might get up to the line. I still love it, but I agree that one might come as close to maybe the line as, you're like, okay, no more of this now.
So yeah, flashing back to Anderson. Going back to like what she's been up to during all of this, they eventually go to basically execute her with her own weapon, and I have to admit, like, I didn't know this only because of the 95 film, but fun fact, if you are trying to use a lawgiver and you aren't a judge, then it can blow your hand off, or just blow up in your hands, can't it?
Yeah. It's all like ID chipped and everything in as your fingerprints.
It's a bit like a cooler version of that scene in Skyfall, where he tries to shoot the gun. It's like, it's palm imprinted or whatever rubbish they say.
If they got Skyfall, it would have been amazing.
Yeah, it just goes boom. You're like, no, James, no. Poor gun. Anyway, yeah, she ends up like battering the hell out of him. There is one scene we didn't touch on. I don't even know if it was worth touching on, but it's the fact that she can also invade people's minds.
Yeah, psychic abilities and everything.
Yeah, I'm just like flashing back to when she has to like invade his mind, and they're having like a back and forth, which is interesting in a way, but just, I don't know, some of it's just a bit gratuitous. Like, for a film called Dredd that's an 18 and involves like throat chopping. Like, it's weird how I'm saying, okay, that's the line we're drawing here. That's the line. Although, I think that's the only time, really, that... Oh, no. Well, no. Technically, throughout the film, she's reading minds, but she never really invades anybody's mind until
that's the only mind invasion scene we get.
Yeah, which probably for the best.
Yeah. No, I was probably gonna agree with you. I mean, like that is Anderson. Anderson's a character from the comic as well, who is a psychic judge, and that is her deal. From what I understand, but I don't know enough about her in the comics to say whether she does that sort of mind invasion thing. But like, yeah, I guess it's just a way of like, doing a mind invasion scene on a limited budget. Yeah. You kind of have to.
True.
Yeah.
Although it does work out for her later on when she comes across the other corrupt judge, and she's like, "I'm your backup," and it's like, of all the judges you could lie to. It's like, this was literally the only one that you probably shouldn't have lied to.
Yeah.
And she just gets shot right out. That judge turns around to Mama and goes like, "Oh, I'm gonna... Yeah, don't worry, I'll pretend," and she has this whole elaborate plan that she's gonna lie to Anderson's face. And like 2 seconds after meeting her, she just gets shot, and you're like, oh my god. Yeah, Anderson goes away to find Dredd, and Dredd's like, meanwhile, in the Coke lab, Dredd ends up, getting shot, which is quite a cool scene, I have to say, or quite an interesting one where, although it is very action scene-y, I will say, where it's like, he's lying on the floor and he's like shot, and, he says, "Wait," as his last words. And the guy, or the judge over him, kind of gloats and goes, "Oh, wait, what do you mean, wait?" Like, surprised that this is Judge Dredd's last words. And, he like monologues, and that's, of course, the reason why he gets shot in the face. To which Dredd replies, yeah. It's like, yeah, I was waiting for her to shoot you. And yeah, it was interesting. It was like you kind of expected it, but you were like, yeah, okay, that's quite cool. Like, rule of cool here.
It kind of fits in with his character of doing that kind of like, just the kind of like, it's not like an elaborate ruse at all. It's just like, just wait. It's just like one word, tone is still like, monosyllabic, like, there's no like variation, like wait, it's just like wait. And then, just like the kind of dry, like dark humor of the moment. Yeah, it is fitting.
Yeah. I think what the amazing thing is, like, directly after that scene, he just like patches himself up. And it's like, okay, let's go. Let's go finish this. And you're like, what the hell? You've been shot through the lung? And it's like, yeah, I'll be fine. I'll just, put a plaster over it. I'll fill it up with some, I don't know, silly foam. And it's like, yeah, okay.
It does look like silly foam.
Yeah. And then, they end up doing the confrontation with Mama. And I've got to ask you, do you think the judgment that he gives is justified? Like, obviously, from what she does, yeah, she deserves to be punished, but considering what he does, yeah,
he didn't skin her.
Yeah, that's fairness. True. Yeah. So, to explain, he goes into the building, he goes into the room where Mama's hiding, and he basically confronts her, and she says that, it's kind of the Bond villain thing, where it's like, if I get shot, or if I die, then, the whole building's gonna explode. To which Dredd just, like, shoots her in the leg or something, grabs her, and it's just like, yeah, we'll see about that, and it's like, Jesus Christ, he is, like, at the end of his tether. And what he does is, he puts slow-mo into her, and then, like, as a kind of, I don't want to say poetic justice, but, it's like karma, I guess? Like, shoves her out the window, and then she falls and she dies exactly a similar way to how the guys at the beginning of the film died. Yeah, the building doesn't blow up, fortunately. It's like, yeah, thank God for that. Otherwise, this would have been a really depressing film. Just like,
he reasons that he's like, right, this building is 1 kilometer tall. Yeah, like the explosives are on the top floor apparently. Yeah. So he says, right, I'm going to bet that this signal can't travel, through 200 levels of concrete. And you're like, that's probably a fair bet. And you know what? Punishment fits the crime, so I'm all in favor. Yeah. I would have put my thumb down if I was a Roman emperor, or thumb up, whatever way it is. For execution.
Yeah. Thumb down for the execution. Yeah, I've seen Gladiator. I know the rules. And then that's essentially where the film just about ends. Yeah, where Anderson and Dredd, like, basically they meet up again, or not meet up, but they meet up at the bottom of the, the tower, and he's like, oh, your evaluation's over, and she's pretty much resignated herself to the fact that she's thinking, okay, I've probably failed. It's like,
she also lets the criminal go as well. That's one thing. Before the final confrontation, they run into the kind of tech. There's like a techie guy, in the building who's like been locking the building down and stuff. And like they find him hiding, and obviously, like, in strictest terms, he has been abetting the Mama, so like that makes him accessory. To I don't know what punishment he would be, but at least, very least, he'd be getting a heavy jail sentence.
Yeah.
But Anderson kind of goes into his mind and sees that he's been like, I think from what's implied is that he's been like mutilated on purpose. So because he's kind of got like kind of implants in him and stuff, and like his eyes, kind of Deus Ex sort of robotic eyes sort of thing. It looks like that wasn't a willing procedure on his part. So Mama forced him to that. So she sees him as a victim and lets him go. And as Judge said, that's that's not only a fail, but that's also a crime. That's, you get jail time for aiding a felon.
Yeah, and she's just like, well, I failed anyway. Just like continue. But that actually is quite interesting. So going back to what we were saying about character development, because both of these characters surprisingly do grow throughout the film. Like, you would think for a film like Dredd, it would just be kind of cookie cutter, like Sylvester Stallone, for example. Like, he's the same character from start to finish. Whereas in this, it's like Dredd, don't get me wrong, Dredd is still like a very objective, like, he's got an objective viewpoint where he's like, the law is black and white. But even despite Anderson doing like things to completely fail the exam, like she lost her weapon, she let a perp go, as they say, she did a lot of things that should have failed her, but Dredd passes her because he's like, oh, she's done a great job of keep in order and all of that. And it's interesting. It's nice to see that it's not just like a two-dimensional. It's like, so how did she do? She failed, and it's just like Dredd. In the credits roll. But no, he like develops really well, but so does Anderson, because Anderson, as was said before, she's a very naive kind of I want to help the world kind of character, and by the end she is quite, I wouldn't say she's jaded, but she's quite hardened, yeah, that's probably the better word. Yeah, you can see her kind of walking away dejected. But can I just point out, like, one of the scenes that really sums up just the entire world of this film is when, Dredd is, like, confronted by one of his superiors, and she said, so, what was going on here? And he just simply replies, a drug bust. It's like, that's it. It's just like, oh, it was just a drug bust. As if nothing more, nothing less. Because it's revealed in the film that this is like the central hub for this new drug coming through, the city.
Yeah.
And, basically a lot of people have been slaughtered and killed, but for Dredd, this is just another day for him. He sees this kind of thing on a daily basis, and it's like, that's grim. And it gives you like a scale of, the crimes that are going on, and, just this world, really. I will admit, I think the worst crime of this film is just the fact that they never built on it. There was no sequel. There was always rumours of a sequel, but they never built on it. And I feel as if this would have been perfect. Because during this time, I'm going to be honest, there were a lot of other films that came out with reboots. You had Total Recall, you had RoboCop as well. Like, two other films that were based on, like, 80s film. I know Dredd was the 90s, but considering it's like an 80s property, two films that were rebooted. And I'm going to be honest, I don't know how you feel about them, but I just did not enjoy the remakes of those films.
I have seen neither of the remakes of either of those films, and I shall not, because Total Recall, 90s Total Recall of Arnold Schwarzenegger is incredible, and RoboCop is amazing as well. And you know what? I was like, I refuse to watch these.
They're just like films. This is going to sound weird being like, oh, they're just films, but I mean that in the most basic sense, that they're average films. It's like, alright, okay, there's the conflict, there's an ending, okay, credits, okay, fine, turn off. Like, they are just so mediocre, it's unbelievable. But at least with Dredd, they had so much scope. They had so much scope to kind of build upon. And I think this is something you mentioned before we came on as well, that it's just they had the room that they could have like built upon this film.
Yeah, like if this had been a success, so it seems like either it lost a bit of money like in cinemas, or it broke even. It kind of, because we don't know exact budget, so it's difficult to tell. But like, if it had been a success and they'd been able to do more, they would have got an extended budget, and that would have really, I think, solved a lot of the problems. They really could have made a bigger world for Mega City 1. And there's so many great Dredd storylines from the comics that incorporate lots of really interesting things, whether it be things like the Dark Judges, or like Judge is like a tyrannical chief judge who models himself as a Roman emperor at one point, takes over the city. There's you could explore the cursed earth, like outside the cities. There's so many great ways they could have gone. And when I did some background reading to the development of this film, and when they were developing it originally, they were looking at adapting some of these more well-known Dredd storylines, but they realized, like, number one, they weren't going to have the budget to do it, and number two, it's quite complicated, like, to jump into those storylines if you don't have a good knowledge of the character, the world, and the storyline itself. That's why they decided to go for this style of it. This is basically a day. They describe it as a day in the life. It's almost like a kind of like one of these like police camera action documentaries, like a documentary crew following Judge Dredd on his average day. But it's such an effective way of establishing the character, establishing the world, and getting the audience introduced to these concepts, which you can then build on, so you don't have to spend a good portion of your next film being like, oh, let's just take 10 minutes out to explain what the judge's system is. And here's 10 minutes to like, oh, this is Dredd's worldview and everything, and another 10 for, oh, here's Anderson and her worldview. We've established all that. We've done all the work now. We've done all the character building and the world building. Now we can really get into like the proper stories and everything. And that's what I think is the real shame about this film, and is that like the problems that were there, I think, could have been solved with an expanded budget. Because this is clearly made by people who really love the source material. you know, and who had a reverence for it and wanted to adapt it as faithfully as they could. I mean, they made some changes and everything, but it's very much in keeping with the character. And it's just a shame it never seemed to happen. There are rumors that there might be a TV series now, is the thing that seems to be the bigger rumor. They might make this into a TV series. You know, I've got my fingers crossed because I would love to see more of this version. Although it seems like at this point now, there wouldn't be many of the original people would be involved with it. So you don't know what you might be getting. You might be getting something very, very different at this point. So it's a real shame. It's a real shame there was no sequels.
Well, I don't know. I mean, Carl Urban's doing nothing but playing Star Trek Online games. So he is.
He's in that Boys as well, isn't he? I don't know.
Of course, yeah. No, sorry, that was just a reference to, like, there's a mobile, like, ad that keeps popping up in YouTube for me, and it's, like, Carl Urban, like, playing with I think it's the, like, lead of, like, Star Trek Discovery, the new series of Star Trek, and they're playing, like, this online, or this, like, mobile game, and it's like, oh, for God's sake. He's just like, how do you like my ship? And it's like, Carl, just put on the jacket, okay? Put on the helmet.
On the jacket.
Yeah, we need you. We need you back here to judge people. It's like, come back. I thought he did a great job, though, I have to say.
Oh, he's fantastic.
I honestly, like, if there's one thing I can praise this film for, like, I don't think any of the actors were bad.
No. Like, I mean, I think some of the characters outside of Dredd and Anderson, I think some of the other characters are one-dimensional.
Oh yeah.
But again, it's like the Raid, and you don't need these people to be the film. I don't think the film would have much been added to the film if we'd had like a big backstory to Mama. In fact, there was some comics released that kind of gave an origin story to Mama. So if you want to look at that is available. But the film didn't need that. We kind of got what we needed to know about her and her character, and the same with the other ones. But like, yeah, Carl Urban was fantastic at doing Dredd. Dredd in many ways just appears as a one-dimensional kind of character, but he really he was really able to do a lot without doing much, because that's kind of what Dredd is. There's a lot behind him, but he doesn't show much, you know, of that thing. And the same for the actor who played Anderson, is it Olivia Trilby or Trilby? I can't remember her name, but yeah, like they were great.
But I mean, even if you look at, sorry, just going back to what you were saying about Mama's character, like you kind of get like a quick backstory about her, but even then, like, it's kind of weird because initially it does like portray her as kind of a tragic character in a way, like considering like everything she goes through. Like, I'm not gonna like go into detail about what, you know, she's been through, where in the words of the film, she basically gets back at the guy, you know, that's basically pimping her out by feminizing him, is the words they use in the film. Use your imagination there, because I'm not going to explain. And yeah, because of that, you know, this like horrible life, you know, that she's leading, she's just like turned to like such violent methods to stay on top. And obviously it's working, so why, you know, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, unless it's bones. In her case, you know, in which case, yes, just throw them all off the balcony. But for her character, there's actually quite an interesting scene. There's a scene where it's quite a horrible one, but it's, you know, when Anderson gets caught, and you know, the like guy is saying, "Oh, what are we going to do with you?" and all of this. You know, like he's been very sleazy throughout the whole film, saying, "Oh, you're so F now, you're so this." And she basically calls him out on it, like right off the bat, and he does not like he does not talk back. It's like literally a mother or a mama coming down.
Yeah,
and she's like, the reason, you know, we're in this mess is because of you, and just like slapping him, you know, and saying, "I would honestly kill you right now if I didn't lose so many guys." And that's the thing, though. It's like she's not saying, "I would kill you, you know, if you didn't mean so much to me," or things like that. She doesn't care about him. Like, her kind of word is law. But the fact, like, she's dictating and saying, "Don't touch her, just like shove her in a room just now until we figure out what to do." Because they are going to kill her, obviously, but I don't know, I just thought that was quite a nice touch. It gave her more, like, obviously I'm not saying it's like, you know, Citizen Kane of, and I know I use that, like, expression a lot, the Citizen Kane of the Dredd world, but at least it gives her kind of some development, whereas...
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, whereas I do agree, I think the other, like, gangsters and things, they are just... Even the dad who dies, okay? Like, even Polo Shirt Man, even Polo Shirt Dad, like...
Or smart for Polo Shirt Man.
I still can't get over that. I rewatched that scene and I was like, is he the only one with a polo shirt on? It's like, and they get shot. See, that's the thing. What's that Call of Duty phrase where it's like, you know, if you're losing a battle, try to look the least important. It's like, yep, if you're losing a battle against the judges, don't wear a polo shirt. Give it to someone else. So yeah, like, kind of just wrapping up. What are your kind of closing thoughts on this film?
I really like this film. Like, I think it is like, I don't think it's a perfect film,
Yeah,
by any stretch. And I think there were issues. There are issues with it. We've talked about the aesthetics. I think as well, one other thing is this film lacks the Judge Dredd comics are known for having a very satirical edge. You know, that this is a world of like of ultra authoritarianism, with, you know, like, as we talked about, machines like taking usurping labor from, you know, from people, rampant consumerism. You know, a lot of satirical edges that aren't really present in this film. It doesn't really go into that kind of element. Now, I think down the line they were planning to explore more of that, because there is very much a thing with Judge Dredd about, he's a bit like the Punisher in many ways. Like, is he a hero? Is he a villain? Because as much as he is like protecting law and order, like, he is a fascist in so many ways, and the whole judges system is very, very fat. And that's, if you look at the original outfits, you know, for the judges, it was inspired by kind of like fascist Spain and these kind of, and the eagle, you know, the eagle's a symbol of Nazi Germany and other things like that, you know. So we don't really get. I think they were planning to try and explore kind of themes like that down the line as well. You know, for a film, it's maybe not always the best to make your hero a fascist, but doesn't always, producers don't want that and everything, but. The film does miss that, which is kind of a key part of the Dredd sort of comics and everything. But again, that's something that could have been corrected in sequels. So the problems I think with this film don't detract from it. Don't detract from it majorly, but also could have well been remedied in the future. And it's just, for me, it's just a real shame it just was never carried on. But I think it's still a good film. It's a cult classic now, and, you know, I can see why, because it's a great film. Like, it's really good, and it's a really good, like, adaptation of the character. So yeah, just a real pity they didn't build on it.
I mean, just kind of touching on when you were talking about, like, I suppose, like, the satire and things of it, there is one scene at the beginning, which I think, see, after that, they drop it, but there's one scene at the beginning where, after Dredd saves the woman in the restaurant from, you know, the guy, there's like an intercom thing saying the mall will be open in 30 minutes, apologies for the like delay or whatever.
That's a good point, actually.
Yeah, and you just see like this kind of street sweeper like, come in out of nowhere, and it's like, even though there's like a huge like dead body lying there, you're like, oh god, you know, like, it's sweeping away all the blood everywhere. And it's like, I mean, we get that, but I do agree, after that it more focuses on the kind of intimate, you know, like, focusing more on the duo and their dynamic against, you know, Mama, who is, you know, trying to stop them. One other thing I will say as well, and again, I think this must just be like an Easter egg for Dredd fans, but I did like the fact that they showed you all the different gangs in Peach
Oh,
Trees.
that was cool, actually.
I thought that was cool. So you had like the judged, who were like, I'm assuming there were people who spent years in isocubes, because they had like tattoos like of judges' helmets on their heads.
Yeah, that was cool.
And I thought that was cool. And then you had like the other ones, I think one was called the something dragons or something.
Peyote dragons or something like that.
Yeah. And yeah, you just showed how Mama's clan was just basically wrecked them. In the words of like a very dear friend of ours, they did not indeed get good. So they were rightfully ousted from their premises. Yeah, it is a good film though. Like, although we got the negatives, you know, at the beginning out of the way, like with the kind of limited budget, it is still a film that is worth seeing. And I do think there's a lot to admire in this film, because it's like, you don't really need, like, and again, I think we kind of like touched on it in our like raid episode, but you really don't need it, do you? Like, you don't need like a huge budget for a film like this. I mean, it would have helped, don't get me wrong, but at the end of the day, what they released, or rather what they ended up releasing, was definitely a product that you could watch again.
Oh yeah, like, no doubt. Like, it is rewatchable, and like, as we said, like, and as you pointed out, once you're inside the building, like, it's the kind of lack of budget thing isn't really as much of an issue. Maybe just in terms of like the clothes and the weapons and things like that, but it's not really as much of an issue as it is at the beginning when we're supposed to be looking at Mega City 1 in all its quote unquote glory. So yeah, like, but again, it's not totally necessary, as you say, for a film like this, which is a sort of like, you know, a more kind of isolated claustrophobic experience rather than a sort of more wide ranging, you know, with a huge ensemble of characters and action in different locations and everything.
I would just reiterate, go see it. I mean, it's available on Netflix, so if you haven't seen it and you're interested in it, Yeah, I would warn you again, Satsunami, family-friendly warning here. Yeah, it is bloody. It is. It's
It's very
probably.
violent.
I would say it's nearly on the same level as the raid. I feel as if the raid is bloodier, but yeah,
I think this is bloodier, to be honest. I would say
yeah, true.
the raid, at least with the raid, it happens very fast. A lot of the things,
Yeah.
you know,
Okay.
this like as you talked about with the slow mo scenes, like there is a lot of like excessive violence that is done in slow motion, so you have plenty of time to
Yeah.
watch people's faces explode and bodies like slam down into concrete and everything. So yeah, that comes with a warning. But again, that's the Judge Dredd comics were very violent as well. It's one of the things they were known for as well. So it's in keeping in that way.
Yeah.
But yeah, if you're not a fan of ultra violence, then maybe this isn't the one for you.
This is going to be the last time I compare the 95 film to, 2012 one. But in the 95 one, the action in that was very subdued. It was very much, I think it's a 12. I don't think it's a PG, but I think it might be a 12 or something. I mean,
I think
15
it's something like that.
or 15 at worst, but even then, like, it would be a very tame 15 by today's standards. It's just kind of generic, action, someone getting shot off screen, falling off of high building, that kind of like action. Whereas this one, because it's an 18, they can just go all out and they can get creative with it. Like, they don't have to worry that. I mean, don't get me wrong, that's another debate about whether it's worth it or not, but I suppose it shows you the brutality of the world that Dredd's living in. It's not just saying, oh, we can solve it by, talking it out with some of these people, because some of them really don't want to talk it out. Some of them, some of them just want to put on a polo shirt and just, shoot people. So
that gang life.
Gang life. Yeah, I'm watching you guys out there with polo shirts. I'm watching you.
Stay away from me.
So yeah, once again, Judge Sandwich, thank you so much for joining me in judging this film.
Indeed, back out to the patrol-amine streets now.
Yes,
Make sure no condiments are causing trouble.
Yeah, the mean lettuce streets. Yeah.
It's brutal out there, man.
Yeah.
It's a grinder.
No buns are safe.
Fresh-faced bread comes in one side, and sliced pastrami comes out the other.
Yeah, I can't wait till we get like a new person into either the T-Posen series or Chatsunami, and they're just going to be, like represented as a brioche bun. It's like you don't know what you're getting yourself into.
Well, as they do more and more Let's Plays and everything, they get more added to them to show they're becoming jaded and hardened to their life. So they get a little bit of lettuce first, then a spray of mayo, and then after a while there's like cheese and there's ham and there's just layered tuna and everything layered on top. I love it. Yeah. That's a great gimmick. That's been included now. Yeah.
It's like, when do I get my 3 latest badges? And it's like, you'll get them when you earn them. And on that note, yeah, thank you again, Adam, for joining in today's,
No, pleasure is all mine again.
And if you want to see more of either Chatsunami or, general Satsunami-ness, you can, I can't believe I actually said that.
Make it a verb.
Yeah. Satsunami-ness, please get it trending on Twitter, please. I've got a family to feed. I don't actually, but let's pretend for just the camera. Yeah, so if you want to catch more of our content, you can see it on Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, TikTok, Facebook as well. We've got a Facebook group, and of course Twitch, as you know, at Satsunami42. So if you want to find me, look that up. And yeah, if you want more Chatsunami episodes, you can catch us on Anchor, Spotify, YouTube as well, and all good podcast distributors. Just look up Chatsunami and you will find us there. And if you want to join in on the live discussion, you can every Wednesday at 7:30 PM BST. Please feel free to drop in, because we honestly love reading your comments at the end. It's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun seeing what you guys think as well of like what we are talking about and what your views are. Honestly, we love the participation. So yeah, if you guys even have any ideas for any future episodes or just general feedback, feel free to message us, let us know, and yeah, I will pass it on to my sandwich accomplice. Do you know what I've just realised? People listening into this in the future, like on Anchor, Spotify, Castbox and so on, they're going to be so confused when I'm referencing you as a sandwich. And they'll be like...
They should have been there in the moment, man.
They should have, yeah. 7:30 p.m. BST. You're gonna come in and see like what sandwich I'm talking about.
See me in my final form.
Yeah. As always, guys, thank you so much for dropping into this episode. Stay safe, stay awesome, most importantly, stay hydrated, and even more importantly, stay out the ISO cubes. I'm watching you, polo shirt people.
We are the law.
The law! Bye, guys.
Bye bye.